Are live. Hello, and welcome to another Arseblog Patreon live stream. Talking to all of you out there, especially the guy who said that he's paying cold hard cash to listen to a podcast about a podcast. This one is especially for you. With me to discuss all that, Andrew Allen. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening.
You've got
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm all right. You've got some wine, I notice.
Yeah, drinking wine. You know, it's what day is it? Wednesday. I've lost track. So yeah,
This
I'm
is
all good with that.
this is not product placement, but it's Coke Zero.
Wow.
Coke
What's
Zero.
up with-
Dry February. What can I tell you?
You're not doing sugar, or
No, I'm just not doing any booze for a little while because I was gonna do the dry January thing, and then I was going to New York, and I was going, well, what's the fucking point? So I'll stay drinking throughout January, and I just sort of felt when I got back from New York, I needed a bit of a rest from alcohol because it's quite a boozy town at the best of times. So there
this
you
is
go.
very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised anybody stops drinking during the winter months. I mean, these are the months when you need it, I think. But whatever.
Well, true. But look, I'll cope, I'm sure, for a few days. And if I don't, I will absolutely move on and just go back to doing what I like to do best, which is drink bourbon. So there. So hello to everybody out there. T. Peretti says, should I turn this off if I haven't listened to the podcast yet? I don't know if you should turn it off. I mean, there's a lot that David goes into in the podcast that we're not going to go into here. And we're not going to spoil anything, I don't think, are we?
We might.
We might.
I mean, we're going to have to talk about the things he talked about.
We are going to talk about...
I mean, the thing is, he's a very wizened source. I mean, I think you should listen to it anyway.
A very wizened source.
Yeah, I mean, he's a man
like an old witch.
I saw him more as a kind of
You're thinking
BBC-esque Gandalf.
BBC Gandalf. No doubt somebody will mock that up on Facebook or Photoshop, rather, to go with all the other David Ornstein Photoshops that are out there. Sorry, I've just dropped a spoon off my desk, so what can you do? So what was your major takeaway from the podcast, from all the things that David Ornstein spoke about and what have you? What was the one thing that you kind of went, ooh, or oh, or I don't know which was your favorite reaction?
I think I think what's really interesting is that we seem to try and go into the window setting our stall out very early, only going to do loan deals, and we obviously didn't really budge from that. That was indeed the case. But what he seemed to suggest was that we obviously did try and go quite hard for a second player, and I still question our negotiating tactics on that front. I mean, it still feels to me that if we were so desperate to get someone in that we were pushing so hard at the last minute and then failed, why we couldn't get something over the line slightly earlier. Obviously, it's incredibly concerning that the money situation seems tight now and could well be tight again in the summer. So tight indeed in January that we weighed up bringing back Chambers on loan, but couldn't even deem that kind of an affordable deal because of the penalty clause.
Wouldn't that have been the most Arsenal thing of all time? It's like bringing back a player that we own and having to pay for him to get him back.
Well, not only that, but I mean, a player that everybody scratched their head out wondering why the hell we let him go out on loan in the first place, and then we were suddenly weighing up, within 6 months, maybe we should get him back because everybody's injured. I mean, that's really weird. I mean, that kind of really struck a chord with me, even though it's such a sort of minor tidbit in the kind of grand scheme of things. There was a couple of other little bits. I mean, there was a small little line about him saying that Suarez obviously wasn't necessarily a purchase that was fully supported by the
a loan, not a purchase.
Yeah,
Thankfully.
sorry. The Suarez loan signing wasn't necessarily supported by the full scouting net, which I assume it just means Mislintat it wasn't a Mislintat signing.
Yeah.
The stuff about Rabiot was interesting, if only because it provided a little glimpse of hope about a positivity on the horizon. What about you?
I mean, I think the Sven stuff really, and I think we can talk about how an organization, when it gets restructured, it doesn't always go according to plan straight away, and there are bumps in the road and all that kind of stuff. But my sense, and from other things I've heard, is that it's not necessarily been, I don't think it's been hugely acrimonious, but I don't think it's been particularly helpful or cohesive behind the scenes. And in some ways, I feel like maybe we've lost a transfer window. I thought James made a very interesting point on the Arscast Extra a couple of weeks back, and I keep thinking about it, in that if Raul Sanllehi is taking over as the head of football, which he is, of course, but assuming the responsibility for it all, right, he is not going to put his neck on the line by making signings in January when he can make better signings in the summer. And we can all see the logic of that, but sometimes in January you do need to push the boat out a bit, or you need to take a bit of a risk. And I think maybe he wasn't or isn't going to take that risk because he needs, not necessarily to make a good impression, but because it will backfire on him if we bring in another player in January who isn't quite up to scratch. So between that and Sven and Gazidis leaving as well, which I think is, I like David's line about how some people might have referred to him as like Arsenal's David Cameron. I don't know if you
yeah, I remember that line. Yeah.
So, you know, it's been a bit more disruptive behind the scenes than I think we would have liked.
There was one other line that actually interested me, which is Sanllehi's relationship with these super agents who we seem to have kind of purposefully avoided under Arsene. I think Arsene kind of finding them quite shady characters who we didn't really agree with. Guys who particularly had close links to someone like Roman Abramovich, who, when Abramovich first came over, they were desperate to try and lure all these Arsenal players away using these big guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was interesting because obviously that opens up a whole different level of player in some cases.
It does, but does it not also suggest that he is looking in markets that he might have looked at, or looking to do deals that he might have done when he was at Barcelona, rather than Arsenal deals, which, as much as I would like us to deal with Jorbachian and Mino Raiola and George Mendes, there's a heavy price to pay for dealing with those guys simply because of what you have to pay them and the associated costs. Actually, you know what? I don't know if this was in the podcast or not. It might not have been. But apparently the loan market now is absolutely insane when it comes to the price that you might have to pay for a player for a short-term deal. It was suggested that maybe for Perisic we might have had to pay 4 or 5 million euros to get him on loan until the end of the season, plus his wages.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't surprise me when you look at. I mean, I think I've seen figures for people taking players off us for around about the 1 million, 2 million mark. I mean, if you're paying that for Callum Chambers for a season,
yeah. I mean, I get it, but like 4 or 5 million for a player for 4 months,
I mean,
or whatever.
It is crazy. I mean, and then you pay his wages on top of that, and then all the agent fees. Yeah. I mean, it all stacks up.
It's a strange old market out there, so but it's been an amazing reaction to the podcast, actually. How far it's spread and how many people seem to enjoy it. So that was particularly good. I enjoyed that part of it because you don't often get. That's a weird thing about podcasts. You don't always get the same sort of feedback you do when you write something. So when you write, people comment on it straight away and they leave comments or tweet at you, and most of the time it's fine, and some people might disagree with you. But with podcasts, there isn't really that culture of commenting on the content of a podcast. So it's nice when you have something like that goes all around the houses and everyone seems to dig it. So we've created enough news stories for lots of other sites as well.
Yeah. I mean, we were discussing just before we came on air the fact that I'm currently attempting to go through the entire transcript, but given it's an hour, it's quite a lengthy job. David, you talk a lot.
He does, but it's good stuff. Lots of Roma sites actually have been taking the.
Well, they're probably panicking a bit, aren't they?
Are they though? That's the question.
Well,
that is the question.
What do you reckon?
I don't know what the feedback is in terms of the job that he's doing at Roma, or the job that he has done at Roma. I don't know what they think of him. I mean,
he's grown a really stylish beard since he got to Italy. So,
well, you could be the.
I mean, he's won me over straight away.
Well, yeah, this is it. Look at your stylish beard and my scruff.
Yeah.
Great, like a fucking old badger here I am. Anyway, as Emmanuel Lane, go on.
A badger who doesn't drink anymore.
Yes, a sad badger.
A sad badger.
Emmanuel Lane says, welcome to Andrew the blog's legend and the beard of wisdom. So there you go. I presume he's talking about your beard.
Well, there's been a lot of wisdom and wizened mentioned so far on this podcast. So.
Yeah, very true. Jezbox, evening gents, evening Jez. In the scheme of ITK-ness, how ITK is Ornstein? I would say very, very ITK. I mean,
it's a question that's asking us to be in the know about David's in the know status, and I don't know
how
David
ITK
personally.
Are we in terms of David's ITK-osity?
Yeah,
Look, he speaks to a lot of people around the club. He knows a lot of people around the club. I think what's interesting and what probably sets him apart in many ways is the fact that he doesn't come out with stuff every day or every week. He doesn't have the job of, let's say, a football reporter, somebody who's on the beat, somebody who's got to produce something for their newspaper every single day of the week, which can, of course, lead you to there's more out there for you to be wrong, right? So when David speaks, it's usually from a position of authority and information. So I think that's why his reputation is as high as it is, because he doesn't have to talk when he doesn't have anything to say. Which is a curious thing in this day and age.
I mean, I have seen the man in action. When Tim Stillman and I went and did the tour of the training ground at the beginning of the season, he was there. And,
right.
He was on good terms with pretty much all the staff when we were going round and stuff. And,
yeah.
But like everybody else on that trip, he was a sort of either a journalist or an interested party who was either a fan or a writer of some sort, and we all had to adhere to the rules and keep our distance on certain things. So, yeah.
Sri the Gooner says, any transfer spoilers? I don't know what you mean about that, but I can guarantee you, I'll spoil one for you. We're not signing Messi. We're not. Who else are we not signing? Pretty much. Think of any player in the world, Sri the Gooner. Think of any player. Now. Think about him again. Think about 3 of his teammates. We're not signing them. That's a spoiler for you.
Yeah.
We're not going to.
We're probably not going to sign Mustafi again.
Oh, thank goodness.
So.
Once was enough. Once was enough. Yeah. Janie. So the story in the Telegraph today that he might be on the transfer list. It felt
the man's worked hard to do that, hasn't he?
It felt a bit like Championship Manager, though, or something, didn't it? Arsenal have finally had enough of Mustafi, and Unai Emery has gone in and sat down at his football manager, real-life football manager, which is what all the managers have access to. Nobody knows this. It's a real-life football manager system. They can go in and just put players on the transfer list, and all the other clubs know that he's on the transfer. It doesn't work like that, but it did feel a bit like that after the game against City. Is this the final straw? If that was the final straw, it's been a very fucking big straw.
Yeah, the final straw was that kind of image on Sky with the line showing how far he'd kept the Man City players on side.
Do you know what the worst thing about that is?
Go for it.
Is that I feel like I kind of have to defend him a little bit there.
Is this what you do?
It isn't necessarily what I would do, but it was because Iwobi had the ball there and he dropped off, I assume, to give him a pass backwards if he decided, not to fuck it up by leaving it. So I don't want to necessarily be nice to Mustafi, but I don't think, that is representative of his badness. I think when you look at the goal, for example, that Liverpool scored, the Firmino goal, if you remember.
Yeah, I remember.
Where even standing beside Socrates made Socrates do the exact same thing. He's like footballing cholera. Get too close and you're fucked.
I look forward to Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novel about that.
Yeah. Yeah, the main protagonist.
Yeah.
Ken Cleary says, cheers, guys, for doing this. You're welcome, Ken. In general, over time, do you think Arsenal can compete in the transfer market with the self-sustaining model?
Honestly, no. Not with clubs that are owned by countries. No. I think that's clear now, and I think there is a very clear division between the very top teams. And I mean, this is unless somehow there are ramifications for the manner in which these teams get their money and are able to spend it. But right now, no. There is no way that you can do it. No,
I don't think so. Now, that's a different thing from can Arsenal build a competitive team?
Yeah, that's different.
By operating in the self-sustaining model. So I think it is possible to create a team via the same self-sustaining model that we have doubts about, but you've got to be really smart. And you've got to have really good sense of who to buy, when to sell, how to manage the squad, and you've got to have somebody able to get those deals over the line, particularly the selling part. You know, when you think about how bad we've been in terms of selling players and players we've let go for really low fees over the last number of years, it's going to be a key factor in how we operate. So hopefully Raul Sanllehi is a great salesman. I hope so.
I mean, I'd add to that, I think you also need a hell of a lot of luck. And there's a bit of me that wonders whether at some point earlier in the season we hadn't looked at maybe someone like a Danny Welbeck, who we knew was going to be a free, it was going to leave on a free in the summer, and maybe thought that might be a player we might sell in January to try and free up some investment. I don't know. But I mean, obviously we lose Danny and that goes out the window. But it's that type of thing, the knock-on effects of squad injuries. And players choosing not to budge, you know.
Well, that's a risky run, isn't it? When you let the contract go into the final 12 months, there's a risk from the player's point of view. You know, if they get injured in April and they don't have anything set up, they could be fucked. And if you're a club that wants to sell a guy or has decided to sell a guy in January, he gets injured in November, you're also fucked. It's the Carl Jenkinson principle, you know. Every time you want to sell him, he picks up a 3-month injury and somehow he ends up staying. So, but yeah, we've got to be really smart. Got to be really smart. We have a question here from Emmanuel Lane. He says, during the chat with David, he said Unai tends to favour signing players he knows. How confident are you that Unai's view of Arsenal is in any way compatible with the self-sustaining model? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't mean he has to sign players that he knows, but I think any manager likes to have an idea of the player they're bringing in, and if they're a known quantity to that manager and he's got trust in them, then, you know, you see it not just at Arsenal, but almost every club. Every manager will bring in a lieutenant or two, won't they? I mean, think about what Arsene Wenger did when he came to Arsenal. Before it even arrived, Remy Gard was at the club. And then he brought in Patrick Vieira, and the next season it was Emmanuel Petit and Gilles Grimandi, who he knew from Monaco. Both of those, Petit was certainly from Monaco. Grimandi was from Monaco as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, there's two players who have come in because Arsene Wenger knew who they were. Players that he knew and players he felt could do a job in the Premier League. So I think that's natural for Unai Emery to want to do something similar, because I don't think it's
I would say it's not just natural for Unai Emery or football managers in general. It's just natural that people, when they go into a new environment, they like to try and nest by bringing things that are familiar with them. And it happens in every walk of life, every job. I think what he's doing is, to a certain extent, he's laying down a marker and saying, I'm going to be here for a while. This is my first iteration of a long-term project. I get the guys in who can show the other guys how I want things done, and then we build from there.
Yeah.
He didn't really get that in the summer. So I think this sort of Suarez, although I don't see Suarez as necessarily being a kind of leader in the dressing room from the get-go at all. He doesn't strike me as that kind of character.
No, he looks a bit timid, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he must know the way that Emery works and must have been triggered by Emery's methods in the past. So we can only hope that somehow there's a sort of osmosis effect that takes place amongst the rest of the players.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm not sure what Denis Suarez, I mean, look, it's too early to judge him and all that kind of stuff, but I just wonder, is it realistic to expect very much from him, considering, you know, his career trajectory and also how little he's played this season? And I take the point that I think Jim, the man from East Lower, made on the Arsecast the other week. You know, he's got a point to prove, that even if it doesn't turn out to be a move to Arsenal, he's putting himself in the shop window ahead of a summer in which Barcelona are probably going to sell him. So,
yeah,
we'll see.
I just look at that transfer and I just think to myself, you add another player to a midfield area which is crowded, and you're already benching Ozil. You're already not making use of Ramsey before he goes. Mkhitaryan, I think everybody's slightly on the fence with, but he too now could be kind of pushed a little bit towards the sidelines, even though he's back from injury. I think it's a really curious one. I'm kind of like really interested to see how he manages that situation now.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are viewing Suarez as a kind of a winger, a right-sided Iwobi maybe, even though Iwobi's not necessarily a traditional winger, but I guess that's where he's going to play him, because you don't want to play Iwobi on the right. Timothy Tarasovic says, does it concern you that a lot of names Ornstein mentioned regarding players Emery likes, former players, are somewhat underwhelming? Sans Rabiot. That means without Rabiot, I guess, or Rabiot apart. I mean, Nzonzi would have been underwhelming a bit during the summer, I have to say.
It's the Stoke link, isn't it? Really? I mean,
yeah, you don't want the Stoke thing going on.
Banega was a pretty underwhelming one.
Kind of, but I like Banega. I like what he's done at Sevilla, but I just found it hard to see the logic when you've already got Mkhitaryan, you've already got Mesut Ozil, you've already got Aaron Ramsey. Yeah. You know, again, it maybe comes back to the trusted lieutenant thing under Emery. Beyond that, I mean, I kind of like the idea of Nkunku, because he's a young player, a young midfielder who could come in and develop and show his potential the way we're seeing with Guendouzi, the way we're seeing with Torreira. You know, I think as much as anything, this is a team that really does need a bit of a change in, what's the word, the demographic in a way, you know, the average age and what have you. So I thought he was quite an interesting and exciting signing. I thought it was very interesting as well that David said he's a guy who the Arsenal hierarchy are in absolute agreement over, that he's a player they really want. So
yeah, I can imagine that, you know, the fact that he's 21 plays into that a little bit. I mean, there's something quite homely about the idea of us chasing a 21-year-old French midfielder, isn't it? It's just like what we've been doing for the last 22 years.
Yeah, it's comfortable. We like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what did you make of the fact that the Arsenal board weren't at the Man City game? They were actually at the Super Bowl.
I mean, I'm trying to imagine Sir Chips and Lord Harris kind of watching the Super Bowl and having a bloody clue about what's going on.
Sitting there with a gallon-sized beer and a hot dog.
I don't think Ken Fry was at the Super Bowl.
I don't think he was. I'd say it was probably Raul Sanyehi, and it was...
Look, I mean, if Kroenke asked for them to be there, I guess you kind of have to jump, right? He's the boss. So that's where the decision was made. If you were invited, you don't say no. Which probably put them in a difficult situation, because at some point they probably also realised that it would get out that they had done that.
Yeah.
I don't massively blame them. It makes me slightly worried that, you know, that the Kroenkes would even put the pressure on them to necessarily be there. That's a slightly odd thing to do. But at the same time, if they were having an important meeting about Arsenal-related business, then
kill two birds with the one stone. Let's discuss your transfer budget for the summer. It's zero.
Exactly. It's zero. Have another hot dog.
Yeah, exactly. Sri the Gunner again. Ozil's benching decision not being Emery's entirely. That was mind-blowing considering the flack Emery has copped for it. It should be said, it should be pointed out that was actually a theory posited by David, actually posited as well by James on the Arscast Extra this week, coincidentally, I should point out, and not one that is stone cold fact. So we can't say for sure if that's what's happening. And I mean, look, football and football clubs are weird and football owners are weird. I wouldn't put it beyond the realms of possibility, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case.
I mean, it's so difficult to tell right now. I mean, I can't help but think if you have a player under contract and you think that he can do you a job on the pitch, that you play him, right? I mean, you can, if you need to get rid of him, you need to force him out. You can start to do that, but you don't need to do it quite as early in the season as we've been doing it. You can make things very clear to a player that he's not particularly wanted or not part of a long-term plan, but still get something out of him, which we're doing with Aaron Ramsey.
Yeah. I think there's a fair bit to come out in the wash regarding the Ozil situation this season.
I mean, you say that like a man who might know something, but am I fishing?
I don't really know anything beyond the fact that we know there's been a couple of bust-ups, when he's left the training ground, and, it's impossible to get to the truth of it because Arsenal as a club are very tight-lipped about these kind of things. Unai Emery, to his credit, has not really thrown the player under the bus beyond saying he doesn't think he's suitable for physical away games like at Bournemouth, which you can read a lot into. And the Ozil PR machine won't give you any insight into what happens. I mean, I think it was quite interesting when the story earlier in the season came out about how he'd left the training ground and what have you. Within 24 hours, there was a piece on ESPN by Raphael Honigstein which said, no, there's nothing going on here. And, it just felt like that was a story put out there by Ozil's side. So I think in the fullness of time, we'll get more to this story than we know right now. And until then, we're all just kind of speculating, trying to figure it out, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense all the time, Oh, sorry, I'm watching a bit of Man City and Everton here, and Man City were nearly through there, so... Yamen Hock, hope I pronounced that right. David mentioned the Monchi deal might already be done. If so, how soon do you think he should start in order that we can get our transfer business done in a timely manner? That's an interesting one, because I saw a story today saying that Arsenal are hoping to have a director of football appointed by the end of the season or by the summer, which strikes me as late for that kind of appointment to be made, the technical director. So
yeah, I mean, I can't help but think you kind of need a guy in place right now if you're going to start making developments over the summer. I mean, it's, these things take a long time. You start putting those feelers out, you start having the conversations, you assess all of the options, of which I'm sure there are a great many. It can't come soon enough, basically. But I definitely don't think there is any deal done. I'm not even sure that he's necessarily going to be the man who ends up with the job.
He strikes me as the most likely candidate, given the way that he's operated at Sevilla. He knows Emery very well. They've worked together well. And what Sevilla have done down the years is find young talent, or not necessarily young all the time, but hidden talent, brought them in and then sold them on for massive amounts of money. I think there was a spreadsheet going around where they listed the profits that Sevilla made on many of the players that they brought in, and they were enormous. And this was a couple of years ago, maybe a couple of seasons ago, and it's, I can't remember exactly how much the profit was, but it was a lot, particularly for a club like Sevilla. And if we are going to operate in that self-sustaining way, then you could see why he could be a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Interesting candidate for the Arsenal board.
But I mean, the thing is, it's one thing operating as a self-sustaining club, spending what we can. if we really are just going to accept that we need to find a guy who needs to find us hidden gems that we then automatically sell on to the biggest bidder in our league, we're never really going to compete with the club that keeps buying our players. I mean, I know internationally you might be able to pass players on, but it does set a kind of, you kind of end up entrenching yourself as a kind of, as a Sevilla have, I guess, in La Liga, you know, that kind of third, fourth, fifth position. Yeah, I don't know. It sets a tone. I mean, the guy's obviously got an eye for talent. He's obviously able to get people through the door, which is really important.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. I mean, what I keep thinking about is the dynamic. It felt like we were moving to a kind of Germanic dynamic within the training ground.
I like it.
Yeah, there you go. You know, with Per kind of taking over at the academy, you had Sven Mislintat there as well. It kind of felt like Arsenal had maybe entrusted, having looked at the way things were going in Germany, as a kind of potential, you know, that might be the experience to take on board.
Yeah.
And we seem to have kind of moved much more towards this Spanish model since Emery's come in. Obviously, Sanlé is already there. So, that would be interesting.
Yeah, it does feel like we're moving away from the Germanic dynamic, even though Per Mertesacker is there as well. Did I see somewhere that the executive committee at Arsenal is something like 14 people? Do you remember seeing that? Like there was Sanyehi, Mislintat, there was Vinay was there, Hosfami was there, this guy, Jason Rosenfeld from Stat DNA was there.
Yeah. The new scout guy, I guess, might now be kind of added to that list.
Yeah, Per Mertesacker was on it. Maybe some of Mertesacker's people at youth development level. I don't know, but I read somewhere that it was quite big. So I do wonder if there's a
when you think about the number of people who are kind of under them. I mean, it's not huge. It's not hugely surprising. I mean, I've worked in environments where there's 150 people, but you suddenly have 20 people sitting at a management level, and you know it just happens. It kind of you can't have so much power centralized, especially in this day and age. It's very difficult. I know we did for a long time under Arsene, but we obviously realised that it wasn't working.
Yeah, maybe. I just wonder if too many cooks spoil the broth.
Yeah.
But, you know, it looks as if Sanyehi is going to be the guy in charge of all the football decisions. And when you're the guy in charge, you're the guy who gets all the praise when they go right. And if not, then you're the guy who people throw things at when they see you walking down the street. Toby Westcott-White, how did you two meet and how did you get writing for Arseblog, Andrew A.? You can tell.
Well, I mean, it was a relatively interesting story, I guess. In my another life, I used to be a budding young sports journalist. I was also a massive Arseblog reader. And my boss at the time, Nigel Brown, who was the editor at sport.co.uk, was very active about contacting Andrew whenever we had an Arsenal-related story. And I think we kind of just bugged you regularly with, like, questions and anything to kind of keep making contact. And then we were actually made unemployed, and you approached us about the possibility of starting Arseblog News.
Yeah.
And we kind of came on board for a bit, and then Nigel went off and found another job, and I kind of stuck around like a bad smell, and 7.5 years later...
Here we are.
Still going.
Here we are. Yeah, I think Nigel might have done 2 articles. I can't remember.
Yeah,
exactly
I think he did about 2 weeks, and then he actually found quite a decent paid job, whereas I kind of scrabbled around for a while, not really knowing what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Also, I kind of like it. It's quite fun. Yeah. It's worked out all right.
Well, there you go. Sri says, will there be a podcast about this podcast about a podcast? No.
Yeah, it'd be a bit Inception like that.
Yeah. Podception. Timothy Tarasovic again. When Emery was hired, Gazeta said he had detailed analysis plans for each player. What do you think was in Mustafi's? I don't think Mustafi's was... there was nothing written. It was just the poo emoji. Yeah,
I mean, I'm really interested by this idea that he had really detailed analysis of all of the players. He's not once played Ainsley Maitland-Niles in midfield, has he? I mean, he's not tried. Even though he was the one player that Gazidis kind of pulled out of the list as the one that he was most impressed that Emery knew about.
He even knew Ainsley Maitland-Niles.
Yes, yeah. Congratulations, Ainsley. Play on the right back.
I have to say I'm a bit suspicious of that whole dossier story. You know, it sounds a bit like something Ivan Gazidis sort of made up. Like if Unai Emery came in and he had a couple of pages of notes and he said, look, I can see this and I know this player, you know, but a detailed dossier on each player.
I'm telling you, though, actually, when you think about it, we played Paris Saint-Germain, 18 months ago the Champions League?
That was probably it.
And he is at the richest club in the world with a scouting team, the envy of the world, and endless resources. If he happened to get some dude to do like a PowerPoint presentation, which was provided to him, which happened to list all of the Arsenal players, and he just went, you know what? I'm up for that Arsenal job. Let me find that email attachment, download it, right? I'll send that to myself.
Tip-X out that guy's name at the top.
Exactly. That's how it played out.
There you go. Well, there you go. Okay, Monchi, I want ye, says Tom. Tom Lynn. Okay, that's fair. I mean, who are the other candidates, really? Mark Overmars at Ajax.
I kind of feel like if Mark really wanted to come, Mark probably could have already come. I'm slightly I feel like the Arsenal link is being overplayed in that instance. Like, I'm not sure that Overmars is the man.
Thierry Henry's at a loose end.
I mean, the man's just made 15 million quid for 3 months' work. I mean, he doesn't need to do anything for the rest of his life if he doesn't want to.
Yeah. I'm not sure it was that good for his reputation, was it?
There's a bit of me that wonders whether they might end up kind of doing an internal thing. I even read something the other day about Steve Morrow kind of working his way back into the...
Yeah, well, I mean, Steve Morrow was, from what I was told, very... I'm not going to say he was very unhappy, but he was expecting to be more considered for the job of the head of the academy, and then they gave it to Per Mertesacker. And I'm not sure it went down that well.
But he hasn't left the club, has he? I mean, he still retains the position that he had before.
What is his position? Because I know he was head of scouting in the US or something, wasn't he? Or he was...
I mean, I'm certain that the scouting thing has kind of taken on very different forms over the years. I mean, even...
I have it here. Stephen Joseph Steve Morrow, born 2nd of July 1970 in Belfast, is a Northern Irish former professional footballer, manager, and currently, get this, International Partnerships Performance Supervisor at Arsenal.
I mean, that's the type of job title you give to someone when they haven't got a job that they just wanted to go for.
Yeah. Here's a job title. It sounds really impressive. I remember when I was a kid, when I was about 14 or 15, and I worked in a supermarket, doing the shelves, stacking the shelves, all that kind of stuff. And from time to time, this was before, ladies and gentlemen, any kids out listening there, this was before there was the technology in place to put €1 or a coin into a shopping trolley and get your shopping trolley and then get your coin back. So the supermarket was upstairs and there was a car park on the basement level. So if you were working trolleys, you were either up on the supermarket level or standing freezing cold in the car park, and someone would come along and give you a £1 note and you give them a trolley. And if you were down in the basement, someone would come back with a trolley and you give them the £1 note back because they paid upstairs for the thing, and that was the job. It was shit. But, it was all right when I was 15. It paid £3 an hour, which was quite good back in those days. Anyway, I remember a little while later doing a CV, and I was asking my dad for a little bit of help about what do I put on my CV, because I don't want to just say I worked in Dunn Stores, shelf stacker or shop busybody or dog's body or whatever it was. And he said, well, what did you do? I said, well, we did the trolleys. We looked after the trolleys. He said, okay, well, here's what you put down. You put down non-mechanical mobile equipment supervisor. Which is kind of what Steve Morrow's job title is at Arsenal.
Wow.
I think. So there you go. Misha Watson wants to know, when were you last without a beard?
Me?
I presume you, because I I'd get about this far, and then I just sort of buzz it all back to very short.
I can actually tell you the exact date, 3rd of January 2007. It was my first day in a new job working at an art gallery in London, and I thought I had to be smart. And I got there that day, and it was a revelation that nobody else shaved, and I've never shaved again.
Wow.
There you go.
Even accidentally?
Well, I mean, I've never had a wet shave since.
Right.
How's that?
That's good. I think I've probably had one wet shave in about 10 years. One.
There you go. About the same.
Yeah.
So it was about then that it went out of fashion. Gillette have been falling out of fashion for 10 years.
Not Gillette. All the guys that we do razor things for on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So
Cornerstone.
maybe the Cornerstone and Harry's.
The other ones.
Harry's
the
and
Dollar Shave Club and
yeah. Aren't Dollar Shave Club Nazis or something though? I saw something about that a while ago.
I don't know. I think they got bought by Unilever or something.
Yeah, there was some scandal. We probably shouldn't look it up because it'll take us down a road we don't really want to go down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Either way, we don't use any of them.
Yeah, Minky Jang says, "Hey Andrew, it's disturbing to me that Ozil believes Ozil is not playing, that Ornstein believes Ozil is not playing because the club wants to get rid of him. Don't you think that's really unfair to Ozil?" Again, the theory about him not playing because maybe there's a financial element, it was just a theory, but I do think the treatment of him is making it very clear to Mesut Ozil that they don't want him anymore. I don't think there can be any doubt in that, can there?
I mean, it's a strange way to show someone that you do want them around. I can't see it at the moment. I mean, even when other players have been injured, like Mkhitaryan, Ozil was still not getting in the team.
Yeah.
Even when the games are not difficult games, Ozil's still not really getting in the team. So I think, unfortunately, our Ozil love affair is going to end on a sour note, and I think they will find a way to try and squeeze him out somehow.
Mark Hubbard says, "Do you think Ozil would sit out the rest of the peak of his career not playing in order to collect a paycheck?" I don't think he would.
No.
I don't think he would do that. No.
No, because I think if he wanted more money, he probably could have gone somewhere, China maybe, and he probably still could try and replicate that money. I don't know. It's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, we obviously have given him a ridiculously large contract, which he's managed to negotiate because we're fucking ridiculously bad at getting our shit together when it comes to this stuff. And we've made a rod for our own back. I can't blame the player for now sticking around at the club, which happens to be paying him the best part of a fucking, £1.2 million a month. I mean, he's probably thinking these guys are ridiculous. I'm quite a good football player. Why don't you use me? Is probably what he's thinking. What have I done?
Yeah.
And if he has that attitude, especially off the back of the start of the season when Arsenal were like, we're going to be his family now, especially now that he's getting the shit kicked out of him in the German media and all the rest of it, for us to then turn around and start acting like dickheads as well. I mean, I'd be a bit of a stubborn bastard if I was him.
Yes. There's a lot of things I would do for £1.2 million a month, and sitting on the bench or not playing football is right down the bottom.
Well, you get to play football 6 days a week.
Yeah, true.
And then the only day you don't play is the day of the game.
Yeah. We have Emmanuel Lane again asking, do you think our summer transfer business is heavily linked to what might happen with Ozil? I fear the club will try and offload him, and if it fails, they might use it as an excuse for no investment. I think that's not unreasonable. I think they really want the money off the wage bill as much as anything. I mean, do you know what? I look at the summer and I think there's a fairly high chance if we can't get Ozil gone, that we start to look around the rest of the squad, and we think, who is a really high valuable player on big wages that we can sell, basically. And I'm not joking. I look at people like Lacazette and Aubameyang, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if one of them become the fall guy in this. I say fall guy. Yeah. I'm sure it'd be an excellent deal for someone out there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went. Honestly, it's getting to that stage now where I'm slightly worried about this financial situation, especially if we don't qualify for the Champions League. Exactly. And it's like, who can you sell? Who are the sellable assets in the squad, which is what Mark Hubbard is asking. who could we sell in the summer to start the process of smart smelling? I think he's selling is what he's doing there. Smart smelling.
Well, I mean, even Aubameyang is going to turn 30 in the summer, isn't he? So I mean,
yeah,
Mkhitaryan. Mkhitaryan, I don't think anyone's going to spend big money on. I think Lacazette is someone who is big money, but I think we'd be recouping what we paid.
Yeah, we wouldn't get much more than that, I don't think.
Not unless it was a really big club who really, really wanted him. I do think, though, you could probably cash in quite a lot on Aubameyang and feel like because he's 30, we've got ourselves a good deal.
Yeah.
I don't want us to, but I'm starting to look ahead and I'm starting to think, who else in that team? I mean, Torreira, start straight away. If you start thinking about a big Spanish club coming in for him, would you start to weigh it up and think, well, it was a quick turnover?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think there are players in the squad who we could sell, but it's about how much they take off the wage bill. Ramsey's going, Welbeck is going, Cech is going.
Yeah.
So there's probably 300 grand a week off the wage bill anyway.
Yeah, Jenkinson will go as well.
Jenkinson, El Neni, I think, has got to go because Emery just doesn't use him. Mustafi hopefully will be gone as well. So
I mean, the thing is, that straight away, that's a lot of players, right? It forces us to make a lot of signings or forces us to promote a lot of youth players.
Yeah.
That automatically turns next season into a transition season.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
A second one. And you kind of start to prolong this process. And, how long can Emery kind of sit there going, it's a transition, I've only now just got my players.
Well, I mean,
people will start to lose patience, won't they?
Well, I mean, think as well that Koscielny is 33 and could be a candidate for moving on this summer. Nacho Monreal is going to be 33 this month, I believe.
Yeah.
So there are players who are coming towards the end of their careers naturally who you've got to think about replacing as well. So there's a lot to do when it comes to recruitment and when it comes to reshaping this squad and making sure it can be competitive. So it goes beyond what's going on with Ozil. I want to get through a few more questions because we've about 10, 15 minutes left. Jad Dow, something David mentioned was the fact that KSE is not invested because of FFP. What are your thoughts on that, and how come it seems no club is being restricted by it? I think that you've answered your own question. KSE are not investing because of FFP. They're just not going to do it. They're just not going to put money into the club. And as David said, and as I think it was Kieran from Swiss Ramble said, that Arsenal are the only Premier League club into which the owner has failed to put any money. The only one.
And interestingly, were never asked to, even when they came into the club. We literally went, just come in and basically be custodians in inverted commas. They've never been asked to put money in, and we straight away set the tone, and they've been like, this is great. We don't have to do anything.
Yeah, as if this was like some fundamental of the Arsenal culture. It was the way that we wanted to operate after we built the stadium, and you can understand why. We didn't want to overload the club with debt on transfers because we had this big debt with a stadium. And Kroenke's come in, right? And he's come in after the new stadium has been built, right? We've got all this extra revenue from the extra seats, from the extra capacity, the extra corporate stuff that we can sell at the stadium. We were in the Champions League season after season after season. It coincided with this explosion in TV money over the years. So Kroenke has had to do nothing at all in order to see the value of his investment rise exponentially, massively. So there's never been any idea in his mind that he would have to do anything to stop this kind of upward trajectory when it comes to money. So I think there's a level of complacency there, and maybe they don't quite understand what's going on, because you can't talk about being in a Champions League final and not put any money into a football club. You just can't do it.
I mean, I think the saddest thing is that actually the only thing that I could potentially see kicking them up the arse and getting involved in this is some kind of European Super League forming, which they then suddenly think Arsenal might not get in unless there's a little bit of investment, and then somehow kind of thinking we need to do something now because otherwise we're going to miss out on this massive big cake which is going to go around the big clubs.
Yeah, potentially. Potentially. We'll see. I do think they are bad, though. I think they're bad. I can't escape the feeling that they're just bad for us, and there's no getting away from it. Mitchell Fernald. Is it possible Emery's identity could actually be his tactical flexibility? Well, while we don't have the players today, I've been encouraged by his willingness to change and adapt on the fly. So is that his football style? It's a bit Wengerish, though, is it? In its own kind of way, in its kind of free-form, jazzy, make-it-up-as-you-go-along, improvisey way from game to game? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, Arsenal always used to try and basically stick a 4-3-3-esque formation on the pitch, didn't he? I mean, I know that he bent to a 3-5-2 in those desperate times at the end, but Emery really is kind of messing with the fundamentals of the formation before they get on the pitch regularly. I mean, look, I don't doubt the fact that being tactically flexible is a clever thing, but I can't also help that the players might start to get a bit confused by that. I mean, there was I can't remember which game it was. Iwobi came on at half time, and there was that kind of Sky Sports snippet. I know it's slightly out of context, but he was literally on the pitch asking someone, "What formation are we playing?" That type of kind of confusion can't be particularly healthy. But.
Matt Crouch, no relation to Peter, I'm sure. Evening, guys. Great podcast with David. Do you think there'll be fairly significant changes to the squad during the summer? A fair amount of players leaving or sold. Ramsey, Ozil, Elneny, Welbeck. Yeah, I mean, look, we didn't even mention Ozil as a departure. So imagine you have a summer where you lose Ramsey, Ozil, Welbeck, Cech. Who else?
Possibly Koscielny. Jenkinson, the heart and soul.
Yeah, the heart and soul of the football club. And, you know, his dad, of course, we'll miss greatly because of his amazing singing. Yeah, I mean, you could look at 6 or 7 players going, and not just 6 or 7 fringe players. You're looking at 3 or 4, maybe, what would be considered key first-team players.
And then you add that to what already has gone out of the door in the last 18 months. And you have a completely unrecognisable entity, like from top to bottom, like from the boardroom, aside from the guys who just won't die, and like you know, like all the way through to the guys who are playing in the reserves. I mean, it just like that is an entirely new entity, new structure, everything.
When you look at how many players, have left over the last number of years. In the last couple of years, Cazorla, Coquelin, Gabriel,
Giroud, Walcott,
Alexis Sanchez,
Ospina, soon to go,
Wilshere,
yeah, exactly. I mean, the whole British core, really. I mean,
Gibbs,
we talked about Chamberlain, you know,
Gibbs, the Ox. Yeah, I mean, wow, some turnover of players. At some point, we do have to consolidate for sure. Okay, this is from Andrew Bolaji, who says, do you think Guendouzi was an Emery signing or a Sven signing? People said Wenger was the one to spot, and I've even heard he's Grimondi's man. Listen, let me put this as clear as I can. Gilles Grimondi, as our scout in France, brought us Marouane Chamakh and Yaya Sanogo. If you think he's brought us a player as good as Matteo Guendouzi, I just don't know what to say. No way. No way. It was a Mislintat signing. He even outlined, we have a story on Arseblog News, don't we, where he talked about how he spotted him in his first season at Lorient, where he played a couple of times in League. So he was a Mislintat signing, and he was somebody we were linked with almost straight away after Mislintat arrived. Grimondi. Yeah. Okay, Reese Thomas. Hi, Andrew. 2. I like that. Little Andrew 2 with a 2 at the thing there. That's good. Who is the Jason guy that David suggested had a very big influence? Jason Rosenfeld is the guy's name, and he is the owner, chief executive, top dude in StatDNA, which is being used, not just for transfers, but to scout the opposition. You got a bit of that, did you, in the show around that you got at the start of the season, or am I remembering that wrong?
I mean, StatDNA are obviously very, very kind of interlinked with the club these days.
Yeah.
I hadn't actually heard his name until David mentioned it on the podcast. But obviously these guys are incredibly important. Obviously they've invested heavily in the stat side of things, and the relationship has to be close, because if you, for whatever reason, choose not to, take on board what those guys are saying, you're effectively saying you're discarding an entire side of the business. So they have to be important now. I don't know how regular the contact is, whether it's daily, whether these are kind of meetings that are held at a top level between the triumvirate at the top, and they do or don't involve Emery. I imagine that they're kind of working to a longer term strategy, right? Like they're not sitting there kind of saying who's the best player today. They're looking further down the line at the development of players who might be a good player, because to be honest, by the time a really good player is already known, everybody knows about him and the price has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
What we need is to find players who are kind of just on the cusp of being very good, and then to bring them into our system and make them even better and give them game time. The problem we have is that when you have an academy with loads of players already stocked in it who are doing quite well, getting them game time, otherwise you just end up... I mean, this was something actually that Andreas Jonker was talking about recently. You can have a really great stats team who have data going down to, teenagers, 12, 13-year-olds who are kind of coming through. If you get them to Arsenal, that's one thing. You then have to get them through your system and give them game time, and then turn them into first-team stars for everybody to go, oh, my God, what an amazing job you're doing.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to do that. And Arsenal always banged on about it. Like, I have to take a massive risk to give a young player a game.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, sorry, looked dangerous there for Man City. I mean, the thing about it is you can get them to this level, but it's getting them above that level, which is the difficult thing. And I wonder if in this day and age, fans are as willing to give young players the time to develop as they need, If
Expectations are so high, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. They really are. I mean, someone like Alex Iwobi comes in for an awful lot of flack, and I can understand why there are elements of his game which frustrate people, but, he's got 7 assists this season. He's not an unproductive player. He's a player who can do some silly things and have some unproductive games. Oh, my God. Oh, he was offside. City nearly scored there again, David Silva. But, his form fluctuates because he's a young player in a team which sometimes plays well and sometimes doesn't play well. And you look at some of the kids coming through the academy, like Joe Willock looks a good player. Emile Smith-Rowe obviously has gone off to Leipzig. Reece Nelson has gone to Hoffenheim. Those are the moves that they need to make in order to get themselves up to speed. So I feel in some ways for Eddie Nketiah, who can't go on loan because we've only got 2 strikers. If Welbeck was there, Nketiah would be out playing regular football, and that would be the best thing for his development. The unfortunate thing for him is he's needed at Arsenal as insurance. So it is a difficult one. I'm going to fly through the last few questions here. Ambrose7, would you say on the season showing so far that Emery is a top quality manager in the league, of the top 3 in England, or is he our Moyes? I think he's probably... I think it's really unfair to call him our Moyes. I think he's probably better than that. More suited to Arsenal than Moyes was suited to United. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the midst of that 22-game unbeaten run, Unai Emery was doing and saying all the right things, and he had a bit of luck on his side, because every time he seemed to make a substitution, it would lead to a goal. I say a bit of luck. I mean, you can't expect that to happen all the time. What I think he's finding now is maybe a little bit the result of the expectations that were set at the beginning of the season, which is we went on a really amazing run, and effectively the squad bought themselves some leeway, which was, Jesus, we're suddenly outperforming. When you lose that momentum and you lose the odd game, suddenly Arsenal always talks about it. You lose the confidence, but also I feel like you sometimes lose that bite, that thing that's keeping you from just like defending your goal with that extra 5% or whatever it is. We've just lost a little something, and the players are settled into kind of going, well, the narrative's changed a little bit. We're now kind of just going for fourth like we always were.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've just lost a little bit of that. His real task now is to G them up again and go, guys, if you don't do this, half of you are going to be out the door, whether you like it or not.
Well, half of them are going to be out the door anyway. We've already decided that. So, fuck it. What do they care? Okay. Do the club want Ozil gone because of his wage and the message it sends the rest of the squad? Surely Auba and Laka are not too pleased. We've already seen the effect it's had on Ramsey. I think the wage is a millstone. Yeah, certainly, And I think whatever people say about Ozil having bazillions of Twitter followers, it is a benchmark. Players don't really give a fuck how many Twitter followers somebody else had or how big a brand they have. They look at what a player does on the pitch, and if Mesut Ozil was playing £350,000 a week football week in, week out, nobody would give a shit. But then it becomes a benchmark when he's played as poorly as he has this season. So yeah, I think that's a factor. Mark Hubbard, my fiance really hates El Neni. Really hates it. This upsets me.
El Neni?
City have just scored 1-0 to Man City in injury time in the first half. A header, I think it was Laporte. It really upsets me as I see him as an energetic, keen, but not very clever puppy dog. Should I go ahead with the marriage?
Wow. I mean, that escalated.
We can't offer any advice in that regard.
I mean, if whether or not you're going to get married depends on El Neni, that doesn't sound like the foundations for a marriage. I would consider your options.
Right. Get married to El Neni.
Yeah. Or a very clever puppy dog.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. What do you guys think of the time on the pitch we've given youth players this season? I expect to see more of our young talents, especially on the wings and defence, considering injuries. It's very difficult to play young players. It really is. We just spoke about how hard it is for them to make the step up. So I think in the Europa League, are we away to Bate Borisov first?
Yeah, it's on Valentine's Day.
Right.
I need to talk to you about that, actually.
Oh, yeah? What have you got planned
for
us?
Not in that way.
Yeah, okay. We'll talk about that later off air. Yeah, I mean, do you take a strong team to Borisov? And then, because there's a week between the games, so do you take the strong team away, get the 4 or 5-0 win, and then play the kids at home? I think that's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. I mean, I suspect he'll take a very strong team. He may even leave Ozil there and let him make his own way back like Dennis Bergkamp in a car or something. Yeah.
That'd be a good one way of getting rid of Ozil. Just leave him in Borisov, in Bate, in Belarus. He can just, knock up to Alex Hleb's house and have a cup of tea. Did Gazidis get his mind blown by a detailed dossier simply by being a copy and paste of each player's Wikipedia page? Ainsley Maitland-Niles, born in blah, blah. That's good. I like that. Okay, there's a French guy. Enjoy the Void says there's a French guy available for a director of football position, possibly PSG bound, though. Thierry Henry to PSG? I know who you're talking about, don't worry. I think that would be an impossibility for Arsene to be the director of football. Just impossible. You couldn't. His shadow would loom too large.
I think Arsene's not going to. I think Arsene's just quietly going to retire. Weirdly, I've got a feeling the longer this goes on, he's just going to sit back and realise how good life can be when you're a multi-millionaire.
Yeah, he doesn't seem. He did mention, didn't he? Oh, you'll know in January.
Yeah, every time he keeps putting it back. This is the indecisiveness he showed in the transfer market, goddammit.
Yeah, will I take that job? What job? I don't know, I'll just sit around. Mark Elisha, is Xhaka becoming expendable? No, I think he's just injured the last couple of games, so I don't think he's going to be expendable. I think he's a player that Unai Emery has a lot of faith in, a lot of trust in.
Yeah, I agree. I for better or worse, I think not just Emery but the whole team at Arsenal are really impressed by him as a person and his work ethic in and around the club. That was the vibe I got from that tour around the training ground. They really like him. They just felt like he was always left a bit exposed by not having the right people around him. They feel like Torreira's the right person, but maybe they now don't have the right people behind him.
Yeah. It's not one thing, it's another. Idur Marvin says, sell Mustafi, and then corrects it to Mustafi. I think we knew who you were talking about, and I think we're all on board with that. Jezza Gunnar. No, Jezza Gunnar. Given the age of the squad, the money we have available, would it be fair to say, considering the competition, we're looking at a considerably bleak 5 to 10 years if we do not qualify for the Champions League?
Look, I think things in football can change very quickly, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's any reason to kind of assume that we're going to have to write off a decade. That said, I mean, we haven't won the league in 15 years, which, when you put it like that, suddenly
really made me feel old there all of a sudden.
Yeah, tell me about it. And I mean, I don't think we necessarily have to like assume that, but it's got to be in the back of our mind a little bit that. Yeah.
Mark Elisha, isn't Monreal out of contract too, or did that contract extension, was it made official?
They never made it official. I've got a feeling they just kind of did a kind of sly under the radar, like it was basically already a contract and all we did was just have a word.
Doesn't the FA release a list of free agents at every club? But I don't know what point of the season that comes out. It's
the type of thing that George is always very good at highlighting, so
those,
we'll keep an eye out. But I imagine he'll be around for another year. I mean, Emery at the beginning of the season was talking about giving Monreal a new contract, let alone extending it. It sounds as though we've come to a compromise because he's been injured quite a lot.
Henry Wallen, could that mass exodus, I presume the one we talked about with all of our players leaving, be the answer or the framework for an answer to all that has happened or not happened? As you said, about 1/3 of the squad players will go soon. That's a hell of a rebuild. Yeah. I don't know if it's the answer or just a consequence of how we've built the squad over the last number of years.
I mean, it could be the framework, but you don't know if it's the framework until they've all gone and you've brought new people in and you start being successful again. It's hard to tell.
Tom Lyon or Lynn, the fruits of Stats DNA have been exceptionally well hidden. Our recruitment has sucked quite a large amount of ass for some time. That's fair,
an exceptional sentence.
It is. But also, StatDNA doesn't just identify players who we want to buy in the transfer market. StatDNA provides all the information about the opposition, all the statistical information about the opposition, and as far as I know, it also monitors all the performance of the Arsenal players, not just in matches, but in training and everything else. So,
yeah, I mean, they literally record every single training session and retain the data for every single
They all
player.
wear their GPS bras, don't they?
They do, and some of them don't even do it for work.
Maybe that's what you got planned for Valentine's night. Who knows?
Maybe. I'm going to make you run with them.
Oh my God, please.
Then I'm going to do a lovely graph.
Minky Jang, although I know it's not your job to identify players who could help us, do you have anyone in mind in defence that could help us? No, I don't. I am not Stat DNA, just to make it clear. I'd like a good right backup. I sort of like the guy at Wolves, Matt Doherty. I'm not sure he's good enough, but I just kind of like his attitude. He seems like a bit of a prick. And I kind of like that. But, like Lichtsteiner, who's also a bit of a prick, he's got legs that work.
Wow. I mean, that really is the type of thing that StatDNA should have picked up on.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know whether it's just a case of I'm just very one-dimensional in what football I get to watch these days, but I can't off the top of my head really think of anyone amazing that would suddenly improve us. I feel like we have a fundamental problem where at the moment we drop single players into our defence and they automatically get infected by the bad defending gene.
Yeah. And, we'll see. Well, Idur, we'll leave this one as the final one. Arsenal rumoured with Kalidou Koulibaly. I'd love it. How about you? He's the guy in Napoli, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, of all the big name, I mean, he is a big name defender who has been...
big guy as well. Wan-Bissaka says Sri the Gunner as well as a right back. He's good. He's really good at...
Yeah, he's the Crystal Palace dude, isn't he? I mean, yeah, he looks a treat, but I mean, he's young, right? And I can't see us spending big money on an English right back. I think I'm right in saying that he's young English right back. Coming in at behind Bellerin, who will then be getting fit again.
Yeah.
Maybe it seems hard to believe that we would spend big money, because he would cost big money this summer when we aren't going to have that much money apparently.
Yeah, we're not going to have that much money, particularly as we're losing most of our squad for nothing. So. We'll see. But look, we're going to leave it there for this particular live stream. Thank you to all of you for watching, and thank you for being an Arseblog member on Patreon. We really appreciate it. This is also going out as a podcast, so yeah, thank you. So if you've only just listened to it, thank you to you as well for not watching and not looking at my scruffy beard and not comparing me to Andrew's perfect beard.
Wow,
beard.
Perfect
Beard. The Mikel Arteta of beards. That's what that is.
I don't know what to say about it. Did you see his hair the other day? Bloody hell. It was exactly the same.
Yeah. I actually do think it is Lego.
I've seen it in real life, and it wasn't at the time, but it must be by now.
Yeah, must be. Yeah. All that product. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thanks a million, guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.
See you later.
Bye.